Sugar was sweet, but its true price was blood. The Caribbean plantations that made England rich were powered not by wind, water, or machines, but by people stolen from their homes, crammed into ships, and forced into brutal labor. The system that kept the sugar flowing would become known as the slave trade triangle, and it would not only shape Britain's empire, it would shape the modern world. Welcome back to our journey through the rise of the British Empire. Last time, we explored how sugar colonies like Jamaica and Barbados transformed into golden cash machines. But sugar cane doesn't cut itself. The empire's appetite demanded workers who could be controlled, worked mercilessly, and replaced. The answer, as far as the merchants of London and Bristol were concerned, lay thousands of miles away on the coast of West Africa. And so Britain, alongside Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and France, became one of the great engines of human trafficking in history. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, around 3.1 million Africans were forcibly taken on British ships alone. Today, we'll peel back the curtain on the trade that fueled Britain's empire, a trade of ships, sugar, slaves, and staggering profit. Picture a map of the Atlantic. It's not a line, it's a triangle. One from Britain to Africa, ships carried textiles, metal goods, guns, and alcohol. 2 from Africa to the Americas, ships carried enslaved Africans across the Middle Passage. 3 from the Americas back to Britain, ships returned with sugar, rum, tobacco, and cotton. It was efficient, horrific but efficient. A London merchant in 1685 wrote proudly, "Our ships return full with the sweet fruit of Barbados, and the slaves, though costly, provide us a treasure of unending return." Notice what's missing: any mention that these were human beings. The system began in African kingdoms. Europeans didn't initially march inland with chains. Instead, they bought captives from African rulers and traders, often prisoners of war, sometimes victims of raids. Guns flowed into Africa, fueling conflict, and with each war, there were more captives to sell. One African ruler in the 17th century reportedly sighed, "The Europeans are never satisfied. If we do not sell them prisoners, they will take them by force." In this way, violence became self-sustaining. The British Crown didn't just tolerate this, it encouraged it. The Royal African Company, established in 1672 under the patronage of the Duke of York, later James II, shipped more enslaved Africans than almost any other English enterprise. Their emblem, branding iron in hand, stamped RAC. Yes, human beings were branded like cattle before even reaching the Americas. And then came the nightmare voyage, the Middle Passage. Enslaved men, women, and children were shackled in the holds of ships. Imagine a dark, airless space where you can't stand upright, where hundreds are packed shoulder to shoulder. Disease spread like fire. Dysentery, smallpox, and sheer despair claimed thousands of lives before the ships ever reached the Americas. Contemporary accounts are haunting. One British surgeon aboard a slave ship in 1750 admitted, "The stench of the hold was so intolerable that it was dangerous to remain for any length of time. The shrieks of the dying were of the most horrid kind." It's estimated that 15–20% of enslaved Africans died on the Middle Passage. In other words, for every 5 people chained aboard, 1 never arrived. And yet, merchants calculated this into their profit margins. Survivors were sold at auction. Families were broken apart in minutes. Buyers prodded, inspected teeth, and bargained as though shopping for livestock. Those taken to the Caribbean faced brutal sugar plantations. Those sent to the American colonies worked tobacco or rice. A smaller number ended up in Britain itself, as servants, status symbols, or exotic curiosities. The cruelty wasn't incidental, it was systematic. Planters worked enslaved Africans so hard that most survived only 7 to 9 years after arrival. That meant, chillingly, it was cheaper to buy new ones than to sustain life. An overseer in Jamaica once boasted, "Better to lose a Negro than a season's crop." That single line tells you everything about the dehumanization at work. Now let's talk about why this system thrived. Money, mountains of it. 1. British merchants grew rich. 2. Cities like Liverpool, Bristol, and London boomed. 3. Banks, insurance companies, even universities had ties to the trade. By the 18th century, profits from slavery and the goods it produced were embedded everywhere in the British economy. Sugar graced the tea tables of middle-class families, rum flowed in taverns, cotton clothed workers. And Parliament, far from condemning it, passed laws to protect it. The Navigation Acts, those trade rules we saw in episode 7, were a crucial part of this machinery. But this story isn't just about profit and cruelty, it's also about resistance. On ships, some captives jumped overboard rather than endure enslavement. Others revolted mid-sea, seizing weapons, even steering ships back toward Africa. In the Caribbean, maroon communities of escaped enslaved people carved out lives in mountains and forests, raiding plantations and keeping freedom alive. And enslaved people resisted daily by working slowly, preserving songs, faith, and culture that could not be beaten out of them. A Jamaican proverb from the time whispered hope. Though the cane bend us, it cannot break us. By the late 18th century, Britain had become the world's leading slave-trading power. The Royal Navy itself, later hailed as the force that suppressed the trade, had first protected it. The wealth generated wasn't just padding pockets, it was fueling empire. 1. Dockyards building warships. 2. Factories of the Industrial Revolution. 3. Political influence in Parliament. The empire that claimed to bring civilization to the world was being bankrolled by the most uncivil practice imaginable. The slave trade triangle left scars across continents. In Africa, depopulated villages and wars fed by guns. In the Americas, generations born into bondage. In Britain, a society enriched by human suffering. And yet, the story doesn't end here, because across the Atlantic, new colonies were rising in North America. Colonies where English settlers were clashing with indigenous peoples, carving out lives on stolen land, and slowly becoming powerful enough to question Britain's rule. In our next episode, we explore the settlement of North America, New England, Virginia, and conflict with natives. See you there.